Hey there, everyone.
Hey there, folks.
This is AV.
This is Rita.
And you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women
and some other folks
that you've probably never heard of.
But today, you will.
Yay.
Fucking nailed that one.
Nailed it. So I want to talk to you about a thing that's happening in our community right now.
Okay.
So
good or bad?
Not good.
Oh, okay.
So I was scrolling on my Twitters the other day, and
I love the tweets.
I do. I don't tweet very often, but I am addicted to reading Twitter. And my tweets are terrible, so nobody ever follows me. I've got 200 followers. It's good riddance. I don't care. Nobody needs to listen to what I have to say on Twitter. I'm always like, my bread didn't rise, sad face.
Oh my God.
Nobody fucking cares.
Crickets.
Yeah,
Nobody
exactly.
cares.
So I was on Twitter the other day, and a post came across my feed, and it was like, Twitter was like, things we think you might like, you know, it's like a suggestion. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I went from 0 to 100. I was so fucking mad.
Oh, no.
So, back in 2018, years and years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
Another world.
And apparently it is a lifetime ago because everybody has fucking like had amnesia, I guess, because in 2018, it was in the height of like the Me Too, Time's Up stuff. And there was a local prominent person, a man, who was like definitely trying to become a like big known face in the area. In my opinion, probably to start running for some kind of political office.
Oh, okay.
And he is the former president of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I posted about it on Instagram. So he came out against abuse against women and all of this stuff like around that time. Did this like public press conference as like the representative from the Black community, right?
Yeah.
And I hate that anyway. Like, there's a multitude of voices and we should not be listening to just one person.
Exactly.
But he got up there and did this. And then like the Inlander was like, I'm going to show all the receipts. So the Inlander, which is our local independent newspaper, published this very long, very detailed, very well-researched article about decades worth of domestic abuse allegations against him.
I remember when that article came out. I remember reading it, and I remember the incident, and I was like, what the hell?
I mean, it's not good. It was not good. And, like, the city council condemned him. Like, it basically shoved him into hiding. When I had posted about it on Instagram, one of our listeners was like, well, did he ever respond? And I was like, yeah, I did a 10-minute Facebook video about how, like, he regretted that he had emotionally abused people in the past, but he had never physically abused people. Well, the police reports say otherwise.
Yes. And
then shortly after that stuff came out, Sean Vestal at the Spokesman Review also did a piece about how he had a questionable past when he was a corrections officer, that he had mistreated incarcerated people. So, like, generally not good.
Yeah, a history of violence.
And he disappeared from public view for a long time. Like, he was still, like, active on social media, but, like he wasn't on TV. He wasn't doing stuff that was, like, well-known or whatever. He was no longer, like, the go-to spokesperson. And good riddance, right? Like, I don't particularly need to hear from you. Until now. When one of our local news stations, KXLY, has decided to do a Black History Month feature on local Black leaders. That 100% into. And their first one is Phil Tyler, the man in question that we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's the first person who's being interviewed on and featured. And listen, all of those reports are allegations, right, that he denies that he ever did. He says in his Facebook video that he emotionally abused his ex-wives, but that he didn't physically abuse them.
They say very different.
As do the police reports, right? This is my point, is that, like, the things that have come out about him are not, like, I don't know, they're not confusing. They're not ambiguous. It's not like that situation that happened with Aziz Ansari,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's like, I think you just had really bad sex, but I'm not quite sure what really happened kind of situation.
Yeah.
So this is not ambiguous. This is like police reports, multiple accusations, decades of them. Maybe, just maybe, we decide, like, let's not feature this person.
Yeah. Like, and what is he being featured for? What is he still doing locally?
Apparently
To
he
be
owns a
highlighted.
coffee shop.
Okay.
But my opinion is that, like, he's probably trying to, again, make himself a relatively recognizable figure in the media, because that's how you can run for political office or have whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really upset that no one is saying anything. So I'm, like, on all of my social media accounts, like, screaming about it, posting all of the links to all of the articles, and just take a guess as to how many times it was retweeted or screen captured and put on Instagram or shared on Facebook.
None.
None. And very few, like, likes or hearts or whatever on Twitter. It's like nobody fucking cares.
On the post for, like, so KXLY posted this on their social media.
Yes.
Did anybody in the comments say anything?
The reporter blocked them.
What?
Deleted and blocked them.
All the comments?
Yes.
So you couldn't even comment?
No.
So they know.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
very aware.
They're very fucking aware. KXLY did a piece on the allegations at the time.
Oh my God.
Like, this is not small potatoes. Like, this was covered by the AP. It was covered by Reuters. It was covered by the Inlander, by the Spokesman, by the Seattle Times. Like, this was not a small situation.
Yeah.
We're talking about a very prominent person in the community who had very strong allegations made against him, and a very detailed, well-researched report by Daniel Walters in the Inlander. This was not, like, just like someone with a blog
Yeah.
who didn't do their work. Like, this is a big deal. I just am shocked that here we are 3 years later, and not only is he being given a platform,
Mm-hmm.
the reporters are censoring anybody who's criticizing them for having done so.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God, all of this stuff, all of this, like, Me Too, Time's Up, it's all just bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's how I feel. Like, I read a tweet today that was like, hey, white folks, remember June 2020? Where are you now? And, like, that's how I feel right now about this too. Like, and you know, I kind of don't blame the reporter, because the reporter is relatively new to the community. My guess is that either this is one of the only people that she knew about, or this was suggested to her by someone higher up in the company. I don't know. I have no idea. That's my guess. But, like, on Instagram and on Facebook, I, like, put a list. I was like, listen, these are the people I could come up with in 2 minutes who are less problematic and who have done really good things for the community. Like, I had, like, 12 or 15 people on my short ass list, and that was, like, in, like, 30 to 90 seconds I came up with.
Jeez.
And it's like, let's just not.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Keonta Duncan or Jack Archer, or, like, a number of people who have done really spectacular, important things in our community and have not been accused.
Yes.
And not been featured in national news.
Which also,
for allegations of domestic violence.
it was his ex-wives, right? And we're not talking just wife. This was ex-wives.
And girlfriends.
And
yeah.
girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
These are multiple women
Yes.
who have said this.
Unrelated to one another, with police reports as well.
Mm-hmm. The blatant disregard for these women is shitty.
Yeah, it's just, it really fired me up.
Yeah.
I just felt sick about it all day yesterday.
That he could do this. You know, they are allegations, but multiple.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the pattern there.
Right. There's multiple. And again, like, he's allowed to have the benefit of the doubt and things like that. But
Mhm.
like, again, we don't need to feature him. We don't need to have a platform given to somebody who's had this kind of
Mhm.
allegation made against them. There are other people to choose from. And that's the thing I'm fucking struggling with.
Mhm.
Like, of all the people, maybe don't go with this one.
Yeah.
This specific person. Maybe don't. And I'm just so frustrated that not only is that happening, but it seems like no one cares that it is. No one but me.
That's crazy. I didn't even, when you posted and I saw the picture, I was like, I remember that story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have people forgotten?
Apparently.
Okay. Because all I had to see was his face. And I was like, oh shit, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, national news. So I don't get it. I don't understand it. But if you are a member of this community, or even if you're outside of this community and you vehemently disagree with him being featured as like a community leader, someone we should look up to, go ahead and tell KXLY how you feel.
Yeah.
Because apparently me shouting it to the heavens is not helping or doing anything. Again, I only have 200 followers on Twitter, so like no one cares what I have to say. But on this show,
Mhm.
we do have a lot of listeners. And I do hope some people say something, because I think it's just a travesty.
A phone call and an email.
An email, a tweet, a whatever. Because to me, it's deplorable to be like choosing him over other people and giving him platform and time and air for people who maybe don't know about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, maybe him getting a foot in the door again.
Exactly. He's getting a moment. That's my piece.
All right.
And I'm mad about it. Could you tell? You can always tell whenever I'm mad about something, because my voice just gets higher and higher and higher. My normal speaking voice is like alto, and then suddenly I'm a soprano when I'm mad.
When you get mad, you're like, oh my God!
Can you believe this? So, contrary to my opening, I have a very fun story for us.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Do you know who Tiny Broadwick is?
Fuck no.
I know.
Tiny Broadwick.
Tiny Broadwick.
That is my new porn name, by the way.
Please don't. Like, she's so little and sweet.
Okay. I won't.
You could have it be something else like...
Oh, I already have a name.
What?
I do.
What is it?
Lolita Mantooth. That's my stripper name, my roller girl name, and my porn name.
Okay. All right. I mean, I just want to wonder, like, how did you come up with that?
It's too long of a story.
Okay. I guess better question is, since when?
Early 20s.
You've had your porn name picked out for
Mhm.
like over a decade.
Yeah. Nick has one too.
Oh.
Rusty Sanchez.
I think that's worse. Because it just makes me immediately think of the Dirty Sanchez. Remember that when we were all kids? In case you're not familiar, in case you're a Gen Zer, Dirty Sanchez was like when you had... Never mind, I can't even say it on air. You know, like Urban Dictionary.
Urban Dictionary.
Just look it up. I can't tell you on the fucking mic. Okay. Tiny is not a porn
Back
star.
to Tiny. Heard.
Tiny is the first woman to jump from an airplane and was the inventor of the ripcord.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That is very necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That is still used today.
Oh yeah, let me tell you how I got there. Because it was not on purpose.
Oh no.
So Georgia Ann Tiny Thompson was born on August 8th, 1893 in Oxford, North Carolina. She was the youngest of 7 daughters.
Oof.
And at birth, she weighed just 3 pounds.
Oh, is that why they call her Tiny?
Yeah, from birth, her nickname was Tiny, and that was basically the name she went by forever. I don't think a lot of people called her Georgia. Most people called her Tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Her young life was pretty fucking difficult. Her family was a working farm family. All of the children worked very long hours in the field from the time they could walk.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, Tiny's first job was working in the tobacco fields, picking worms off the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So she would like sit.
Pick the little worm.
worms.
Yeah, that was a job.
Well, yeah, that needed to be done. Eventually, though, the farm could no longer sustain their family. This is a pretty large family. They have 7 daughters and parents, so
Yeah.
9 people to have one farm. It just wasn't working. So their father moved the family to a small town called Henderson, North Carolina, where he found a job working in the town's cotton mill. Tiny didn't have an opportunity to be much of a kid.
Yeah, no, you're going to have to work.
I don't think she ever went to school.
Ooh.
So, like, really did not have, like, much of a childhood. The one thing she did do as a child was that she loved to climb trees. So she would climb as high as she could get, and then she would sit and look out over everybody. She really loved heights.
I completely identify with that. I love heights. I would climb up and get on the roof when I was a kid. I'd climb up trees. I still do sometimes.
I am no longer a fan of heights. I used to be like, it wasn't a big deal to me, but now I'm like, if I go on a Ferris wheel, I'm like, good God, get me down.
Oh, no.
It's bad. So she would go up there, and she said that being up in a tree, she felt like she was closer to God. But even this small little bit of her childhood ended very soon. She married a man named William Jacobs when she was 12 years old.
Ooh, 12?
12.
Oh,
And she gave birth to her daughter Verla the next year.
yikes.
13 years old.
13.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, girl had no childhood.
Yeah.
Sources are really, like, I read a lot of sources, including an entire biography of Tiny. And some said that her husband abandoned her, and some said he died in an accident. I don't really know which happened.
Okay.
Because they were both credible sources, but they varied on what happened to her first husband.
Okay.
So regardless, she was a single mother at the age of 13.
I wonder if part of it was if he did abandon her, she just said he died.
I was wondering that too, if it was to save face.
Yeah.
So Tiny's biographer was a woman named Elizabeth Whitley Roberson, who was actually a history teacher in North Carolina.
Nice.
And she found out about Tiny and realized that her own history books that she was teaching didn't have Tiny in them.
Oh my gosh.
So she decided to do all this research and wrote a book about her.
That's awesome.
It's really cool. So her biographer is Elizabeth Whitley Roberson, and she spoke with a whole bunch of Tiny's remaining family members. And they described Tiny's life at this time as pretty bleak. She was working 12 to 14-hour shifts at the cotton mill for 40 cents a day.
Whoa.
And she would have to stop work and rush home at 10 o'clock a.m., at noon, and 3 o'clock to breastfeed.
Oh my gosh.
And then go back.
Yeah.
The amount, like, first off, having a baby, like, having a newborn is exhausting work.
Mm-hmm.
Just existing. Let alone trying to work a 12 to 14-hour shift at a cotton mill and having to rush home and breastfeed and rush back and, like, somehow in there eat so that you have something to even breastfeed.
Yeah.
Just sounds awful.
And also doing it on her own.
Yeah.
You know.
Needless to say, her life was pretty difficult, and she was really desperate to get out of it, as I think most people would be.
Yes.
Especially at 13 and 14. So right around that time, there was a carnival that came to nearby Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called the Johnny J. Jones Carnival. And she was like, I'm going to the carnival. She had been interested specifically to see the aeronauts, the people who flew. And at this time, they were mostly flying in hot air balloons, which we've talked about before with Mary Carlotta Myers.
Yes.
Who I love, probably one of my favorite people I've ever talked about. So she was going there to see a very famous aeronaut named Charles Broadwick. And Charles's routine involved flying a hot air balloon until it reached its peak, and then he would jump out of the balloon and parachute to the ground.
Oh, okay.
And when I say jump out, that is actually incorrect. Because what I learned is the balloons that they parachuted from had no basket.
Oh.
Yeah, doesn't that sound terrifying?
Yes.
Sounds fucking terrifying. It looks terrifying. So they were just like hanging there.
And then just let go.
Yeah, basically.
That sounds like a weird job.
And like the parachute, I think, was connected to the balloon. So when they dropped, the weight of their body is what opened the parachute.
Oh, I see.
So she saw this and immediately was like, that's what I want to do with my life. Can you imagine? You're like, I would like to be suspended in air in a thing that's on fire.
Blindfolded and then sharks.
She's like 13, like, that's it, mommy. I want to do that. So that's exactly what she did. She immediately like went up to him and she was like, I want to do this. Like, and also like, look at me. I'm so small. I'm so small and I'm cute.
Oh,
People
no.
are going to want to come see me. And he was like, you're right.
You're going to be a star, kid.
That's right. That's right. And also like, he was like, you're right. Like you are so little, the balloon could probably go higher than it would be with like a full grown man. Right. It's like, she is very small. Like at her peak height and weight, I think she was just under 5 feet and 90 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
She was tiny, literally.
Literally tiny.
So Charles agreed until he found out that Tiny was actually a mother.
Oh.
He was like, no way. You can't bring a child on the road. Like, this is just not my deal. I'm not going to let you come with me. And her mother was also like, I think Tiny's too young to do this, which I'm like, wait.
She's too young, but she's a mother and she's separated wife.
She's too young to travel in a carnival, but she's old enough to be married and have a baby and work full time?
Nah.
Seems strange. Seems priorities are weird. So eventually, though, her parents did agree to let her go. And there were a couple of conditions. One was that she had to leave her baby at home. So her mother was going to raise her child. And the other, and like in exchange, her mom would receive the majority of her salary to care for her child.
Okay.
Which also seems fair. But the other thing was, it was really inappropriate at that time to have a young woman traveling with a man that she was in no way related to.
Mm-hmm.
Not an uncle, he wasn't an uncle, he wasn't a father, he wasn't a husband, he was just some random dude.
Yeah.
And so Charles legally adopted Tiny.
Okay, as his child?
Yes.
Okay.
So her bio dad gave up his parental rights to her, to this man.
These are all bad choices.
They're fucking wild.
No.
They seem very wild to me.
Yes.
But that's exactly what happened. And she changed her last name to Broadwick, right?
Okay.
So she became Tiny Broadwick.
Okay, I'm glad, because I thought, like, he was just going to marry her or something so that they could just be on the road together. And then, no, did he marry his kid?
Well, sometimes when they traveled, Charles introduced Tiny as his wife. He'd be like, this is my wife, Georgia. And later on, her own family members admitted they weren't entirely sure what the relationship between the two of them really was.
Okay.
And there's a picture in the biography that her family members had given to the biographer that I was like, that looks like a wedding photo.
Oh my goodness.
To me, it looked like a wedding photo. I have no idea if it was. Again, her family doesn't know. And there's no like legal thing that says that they were married or anything. But like the fact that he occasionally introduced her as his wife and she changed her name and they traveled together for years. Plausible. And also I find that really gross too, right? Like, because again, when she joined his carnival, I think she was maybe 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was about 14 because it'd been a while since like her husband had left or died or whatever. And she was a little bit older. So I think she was about 14 when she first started traveling with him. And he was in his late 30s.
Yikes.
Like he was my age.
Okay.
And how old is Isai?
My son is 13.
Right.
Mm.
How would you feel?
No. No.
That's weird, right? It's real weird. So anyway, I don't really know, but like, that's a little unsettling. That's basically the only time that things get very unsettling in her biography is like whatever was going on with Charles. Like, I don't really know the extent to it. She never talked about it openly, which makes sense. I think she was really savvy as I watched her talk in interviews and things like that and later in life. I think she was extremely savvy about her image. And for that age and time is impressive. So no one ever really understood what that relationship was, and she never let anybody know. Because then if they knew, if there was something unseemly about it and that got out, like her image would be, muddied.
Yeah.
Her biography would be a little bit more complex.
So
I think she really did go to great lengths to like keep a lot of that.
It?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just
tidy it up a little
her
bit.
personal life is just basically missing from most articles, biographies, interviews. Nobody asks her about that.
If you ever had the choice, would you do that? Like if someone's like, I'm going to write a book about you. And they're like, nothing could be found about.
Would I ever keep my...
Like, clean it up.
No, I wouldn't. Would you?
Maybe.
Here's why I wouldn't. I think a lot of the stuff that has happened to me is what has made me who I am.
True.
And part of my like sort of ethos as a person is that I think we need to share those dark parts of our history because it helps other people and understanding like what's happened to them, but also how to get through it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, I personally would not, but I can understand why you would. Because the time in which she's like growing up and being raised and talking about her history is like the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like you just can't talk about those kinds of things. So nonetheless, Charles was her way out of this pretty fucking terrible life and a gateway to what she's dreamed of, which was being in the air. She really liked this part of her. Like, that's what she always wanted to do. So in that way, I think, okay, it must have been worth it to her no matter what was happening. So Charles Broadwick actually had created the balloon that he flew in. Not only had he made it, but he had like started to do designs and things for parachutes and balloons and would like test them out in order to see like what worked and what didn't. So he saw a really good opportunity in hiring Tiny because he knew, one, that he could like put her in things that he couldn't possibly be in.
Yeah.
And also because of her stature and being so cute and pretty that she would bring in a lot of money.
Yeah.
He even like, you know how like Mary Carlotta Myers became Carlotta?
Yeah.
Like that was her stage name. So everybody had like a stage name when they were in the carnival. And so he saw Tiny, and like Tiny was already a stage name, but whatever. He was like, I'm going to dress you up as a baby doll. Fucking weird.
Oh my God.
And she became known as the Doll Girl.
You can't come up with a better name than that.
I know.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Doll Girl.
I know, I agreed. I was like, why don't you call her like Tiny the Doll?
I
don't know. Anyway. So he would have her dress up like a baby doll, wear her hair in ringlets. She always had a bonnet on and little pink bows, and she would have ruffled bloomers on under her dress. And like really just like, she was already so small and so young, it made her look like she was like 7.
Oh no.
Like flying out of a fucking balloon. And everybody's like, oh my God, that little girl. It's like,
oh, that is such shelf value. People would be in droves.
oh yeah, they're like, a little girl is jumping out of, and she was a small young person.
Yeah.
But she wasn't as young as they were making her look. So, and she hated this. Fucking hated dressing like this. She hated being called a doll because she was a really big tomboy. And she was like,
God.
fuck it. Just reminded me of Abby telling me about how she would get in fights with her mom all the time whenever her mom wanted her to put a dress on.
Oh, I did the same thing when I had to wear a dress for church. The car wouldn't even be stopped, and I'd be opening the door, and my tights would be almost all the way down. I'd jump into the grass and stomp them off and go run in the grass. Literally taking stuff off.
Yeah, you're stripping as you go. That's kind of what she was. She really, really hated it. And she also was like, it's easier for me to jump when I'm in pants. But that's not what people come to see.
Mm-hmm.
And she was even like, so, like, they're acting like I'm this, like, modest doll. She was like, there's no modesty in my jumping. Like, wearing a dress means the dress comes all the way up to her fucking chest.
Yeah.
In the wind.
Which is dangerous because she can't see.
Yes, it's dangerous. And, like, everybody can see her bits. Her bits and baubles are showing. And she was like, why don't I just wear fucking pants?
Yeah.
Anyway, she did not get to wear pants for a very long time. But people did come to see her jump because of this whole getup and idea. Her first jump was in 1908 at the North Carolina State Fair. Again, it's her first public jump. Everything went well in the air. On the way down, she has like no control, right? Because it's a balloon.
Yeah.
So she can't steer it really very well. She ended up landing in a blackberry bush, and it took people a while to find her. So she just laid there and ate blackberries.
Oh my God.
It's like show up and her whole mouth is blue. It's very funny.
You just let her fuck it.
Yeah, she was like, I guess I might as well snack. I'm gonna be here a while.
I need some protein.
She couldn't get out of it because she's tangled up in this fucking blackberry bush. Blackberries hurt too.
They do. Big time.
She's in a dress. God, awful. So over time, under Charles Broadwick's tutelage, she did learn a lot about how to navigate the balloon, how to fold her parachute, and when she should jump. When the balloon was at its peak, so also, let me talk about these balloons. They're coal oil fired. Coal oil.
That is so dangerous.
Right. And we're talking an open flame, right? So I told you there was no basket. So like it's just like this like fire.
Yeah.
Heating this balloon, and it would reach a peak, and at the peak it would start to descend. So you had to know when it was going to reach its peak, and there was no altimeter or anything like that. So they didn't know. It was just like by feel.
Oh God. And
so
this is all bad.
So when it was reaching its peak, Charles would be down on the ground and he would shoot off a blank to let her know now's the time to jump. Now's the time to open the parachute.
Oh my God.
This all just sounds so wild and dangerous.
It does.
So I want to use the actual description from her biography because I can't adequately explain it without this.
Okay.
So this is what the biography said. The balloons were huge, containing over 1,100 yards of a lightweight sheeting that was like an unbleached muslin. And the balloon stood over 92 feet high and 56 feet through the middle. There were cotton ropes in them that strung out about 30 feet from the top of the balloon to where Tiny would hang on a trapeze at the bottom. And then Tiny was suspended in the air until the air inside it would start to cool. And then as the balloon would reach its maximum height, she would release herself and float to the ground. Also, I mentioned this already, she did not have an altimeter, so she actually didn't know when she was reaching like its peak or where she had to go down.
Yeah.
And because she was in a balloon, there's not nearly as much control. So if the wind starts changing, once you're in the air, like you're fucking screwed.
Jeez.
So parachuting from balloons was really dangerous. Tiny actually described how she would try to steer, basically. She said, coming down, you can steer the parachute by raising or lowering the sides of the wooden ring, which holds the seat.
Okay.
Scary.
Yeah.
And because of the coal oil, it was extremely flammable.
Yes.
Yeah, the balloon could go up in flames at any moment. So, as you might imagine, there were quite a few mishaps.
And then there's bears on the ground and
So on one of her jumps, the balloon did get singed and it tore in half.
Oh jeez.
So she was on top. She ended up like landing on top of. It was at a carnival, right? It had a big top.
Yeah.
She landed on top of the big top.
Oh my gosh.
Took down the entire tent with people in it. Like,
oh my gosh.
She ended up not being hurt and nobody ended up hurt, but like, God, seems bad.
Yes.
This other time she started coming down and the wind took her and it was bringing her down between two buildings.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like ready to smash her. Like she would have just died. But luckily she was able to like catch onto a cement wall and didn't die.
So it's like maybe, Tiny, you should start rethinking
Your life choices?
Yes.
And then another one, she actually ran into a train. Thankfully,
You're fucking joking.
the conductor saw her coming. Saw this like child.
Could you imagine being that guy driving that train and you're just like trying to wonder if like you packed your lunch or not, and this fucking baby doll child in a fucking balloon.
A baby doll in a balloon is coming straight for you.
Blackberry teeth and everything.
Yeah.
Just heading towards you. Would you think you were crazy?
So so the conductor managed to stop the train, but she couldn't stop. She just ran right into the train.
Oh my God. This is bonkers.
She broke the window and like landed inside the train.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she dislocated her shoulder on that one.
Oh, Jesus.
But can you imagine being a passenger? There's just a
Mommy,
baby doll.
there's a girl in the air. Don't be a liar, son.
Oh my God. So that okay, I'm gonna tell you this story because this one is probably my favorite.
Gonna pee my pants.
One of the times that she had like a weird landing, it was in a cemetery, and there was a girl like visiting a loved one's grave,
Oh my God.
and all she could see was like a child in white floating towards her. And I just was like, can you imagine? And you go to school the next day and you're like, I saw a girl floating to the ground, and they'd be like, you're a fucking liar.
Okay, folks who are listening right now, I hope you're laughing as hard as we are.
Oh my God, that one killed me.
That is brutal.
Just drifting among tombstones.
Oh my God, I'm crying. I'm literally crying.
Yeah. Okay. I figured like the last one I did was so heavy. I was like, we got to do some different. Okay. So Tiny was a big hit, right? She's doing this for a while. Remember, her salary is supposed to go home to her family. She's supposed to be making $250 a week plus travel costs. That was her salary. And the thing is that like the majority of it was supposed to go to her family, but she should have been seeing something. She did not.
Ooh.
No, nothing. She got paid in Coca-Cola. For real.
What?
She was like, I got paid in like a sandwich and Coca-Cola.
Why would she still do this? Because she just liked
first
it so
off,
much?
she's a child.
Yeah.
Let's just keep in mind that she's a young person without any guidance, and a man is making money off of her.
Yes.
So she wants to do this thing. He's giving her the opportunity to do it. I imagine there's a lot of manipulation happening.
Yeah.
Some coercion happening. Maybe some grooming happening. So she's going along with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
He's making money off of her. She's not seeing any of it, but she was like, I was cool with it. That's later. Remember I said she was really good about cultivating your image?
Yes.
She was like, I paid it no mind because I liked Coca-Cola. And I was like, yeah, girl, that's not it. I know that could not have been the whole story. Like,
Yeah.
she obviously, the fact that it was mentioned in her biography means that there was something to it.
Yeah.
You know? And she talked about it. Like, she answered the question like, oh, I just like Coca-Cola. No, that's not it. So as she became more and more adept at her jumping, she began to incorporate some stunts into it. Like, as if her shit wasn't dangerous enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes she would do like backwards jumps or like backflips. She would have fireworks, which I think sounds really bad.
Adding more fire? We don't
Yeah, I
need
know.
any
She had
more
like
fire.
flares.
Okay. That does not make it better.
No, I think it actually makes it worse. It's handheld. Like, shoot it off or something, but don't like have it in your hand in your parachutes.
Oh my God.
So, she also would do sometimes double or triple balloon descents, like
Okay.
parachutes. It seems weird. And she had like more than one parachute on her jumps, which I didn't really understand very well until I listened to her describe it. And so I'm going to actually play a clip. This is from a game show that she was on in 1964. So she's in her 70s at this point.
Okay.
In the show. It was a game show called To Tell the Truth. Are you familiar with that one?
Mm-mm.
I know I watched something like it later, but it's like the premise of the game show is that celebrity judges are on the panel, and the show would bring on 3 people, and they would give a little biography of a person, and the celebrity judges would have to guess which of the three is the real person.
Okay.
So in this case, which one of these three is the real Tiny? So they give a little biography about her jumping career and all this stuff, and then they say, okay, celebrities, like, pick which one you think it is, and they have like a certain amount of time to ask the panelists questions to determine which one is which. So just know that she's number 2, but listeners, you're going to know who she is immediately anyway, because she sounds tiny.
Okay.
She doesn't just look it, like, her voice, even at 70 years old, is like so small, like very high pitched, very small, very sweet.
Yeah.
I just love, I honestly just love watching her talk. I love watching her do anything. And I think you're really going to understand what I mean about being able to cultivate her image by watching her and listening to her talk.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
Glenn Martin. Oh, number 2, how did you get in the hot balloon?
You don't get inside of a hot balloon. You hang on a parachute on the bottom.
Ah, well, number 3, what did you cut yourself away with?
I had a little knife that I cut myself away from the balloon.
Just a small pocket knife.
Well, a certain knife that was made for that purpose.
Thank you. Number 2, were your people carnival people?
No.
Number 3, how did you learn how to fly?
How
to do parachuting.
It was an inspiration. I thought it would be exciting, and I started it at that particular time.
And were your people carnival people?
No.
Number 1, what kind of
Kitty, you were going nuts there. Number 2, how did you say you hung on to, what did you say in answer to Kitty's question about being in a hot air balloon?
She asked if I was in a hot air balloon, and I said no. I was hanging below the hot air balloon in a parachute.
You weren't even in the basket.
No.
Oh, my goodness.
The basket.
Do you fly, number 2?
No.
Did you at that
No.
time? No. Number 3, did you fly?
No.
No. Number 2, how did you get started doing this, may I ask?
Oh, I guess it's because I was a tomboy, wanted to do something different.
No friend of yours introduced you to the idea of parachuting?
No.
How about you, number 1? How did you get started doing this?
Well, I just hung around the carnival because I was so excited about it, and I was small, and they wanted someone light, and so they asked me if I'd do it.
My goodness.
Peggy Cass.
Number 3, when you were hanging from your hot air balloon by your parachute, was it folded or was it open?
The parachute?
Yes.
It was folded in the back of me, and as I cut the string from the balloon, I ascended. Or descended, I should say.
Well, number 2, did you use 3 different parachutes on the way down?
Yes.
Number 2, who folded your parachutes?
I did.
And number 1, what kind of material were the parachutes made from then?
Well, the balloon parachutes were cotton.
But the parachute that you used, number 3, was that made of
That
cotton?
was cotton, too, at that time.
Number 1, if no parachutes were used much, how did you know how to fold it?
Orson Bean taught her. Orson?
Number 2, tell me again about how you went in the hot air balloon. I like to hear that. You just hung underneath on a string, did you? And
No, you have your parachute.
the parachute, but it wasn't open, was it?
No. When you cut yourself loose from the balloon, your weight opens your parachute.
Oh, I see. Number 1, tell me.
So you can tell, I mean, was I right about her voice?
Yes.
You can just tell.
Yeah.
You just tell by hearing her that she's small.
Yeah.
But I thought that the way that she articulated how she got out in the balloon, and also how she released the parachutes, I thought was really helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because her describing it like clarified a lot of stuff for me. So in 1911, Charles brought their act to the world's second international aviation meet in Los Angeles. They had, I think it was around this time that they ended up moving to California. When she landed from her jump there, one of the pilots participating flew her back to the grandstand in his plane. And that was her first time in a plane. And she immediately was like, oh, this is where I want to be. I want to be inside a plane. So in 1912, at the third meet of all of these international aviators, she met Glenn L. Martin. And Glenn at the time was a very famous and successful aviator. He was known worldwide for the planes that he built and flew. And he had been working on planes ever since he was a little boy. Like he started building, he built his first plane like when he was a teenager.
Okay.
And it only flew like 30 feet, but it flew.
It flew.
And like he designed it and built it by himself when he was a teenager.
Wow.
So he's a pretty impressive dude. And so he sees her and he was like, I get it. This is it. And Tiny was really intrigued by Martin and his planes. And he thought that working with her would be a moneymaker for him. And Tiny was like all in. She was like, I want to jump from planes. I want to move from balloons to planes. So the two of them decided to work together. And they were using this parachute coat packet thing that Charles Broadwick had designed.
Okay.
So Charles had, again, he was the one who was basically inventing these parachutes and the packs and the way that you would open them. And that's what they were using. Later on, Martin takes credit for the entire thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a whole situation that I don't quite understand because Charles doesn't correct people for a really long time.
Okay.
That he was actually the one who created it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like he actively goes along with the idea that Martin made it.
That's a little suspicious.
Yeah, something feels very hinky about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, she starts working with Glenn using the pack that Charles had made. And her first jump from a plane is on June 21st, 1913. She wore this jacket it's a jacket and a backpack.
Okay.
And inside of the backpack is a silk parachute. So let me tell you about how they created this.
Okay.
So the bag, like the coat bag thing, had this really long static line, and that would get wrapped around the fuselage of the plane. And so then she would like sort of sit like suspended in the air right behind the wing. And when she would jump, the body weight would pull her parachute open because she's connected to the plane.
Okay.
So her bag would stay like on the plane, but the parachute would come out and she'd be able to float to the ground.
They sometimes do that. They'll put a hook on your parachute, and as you jump, like skydiving, it'll pull it for you.
Yes. It's very different though. The whole contraption is connected to the plane. It's exceptionally dangerous.
Okay.
Imagine like rotary.
Oh, God.
Like you've got spinning blades.
Yeah.
And you're connected to the plane. Jeez. So she was hanging in this little trap seat that was made to hold her. And she was the one who pulled the lever that would drop her. And she would release her seat and the weight of her body would open the parachute. Her first jump was over Griffith Park in Los Angeles. And it was very highly anticipated, very highly publicized because he had a big name. He was a big name in flight. So it had garnered quite a bit of attention. And in fact, two of the major newspapers in LA sent reporters to go up in the plane.
Oh, wow.
To cover the story. One of those was a reporter for the LA Times named Bonnie Glessner. And this is how she described being in the plane and watching Tiny drop. When Tiny was ready to drop, Martin touched my shoulder. I faced about and turned my eyes on the face of the child. She was clambering over the side of the machine as though it were stationary. Once over, she clung tenaciously, her eyes fixed on Martin, who was just then looking down over the side of the aeroplane. The signal came while he watched below. Just the slight movement of his hand, but the girl understood, and her lips formed a goodbye, which I sensed rather than heard. Smiling at me, she stepped off into space, not even a tremor of the machine showing that she was gone.
Oh my gosh. She's just like a little flea bouncing off.
Yeah, and like just the fact that she's like, goodbye, smile. She's just fearless.
Yeah.
This made Tiny the first woman to ever jump from a plane. At the time, it was actually reported that she was the first person to jump from a plane, but there was actually a man who had done so prior, but he hadn't gotten publicity for it, so it was
Yeah.
not as well known. But she was the first woman to do so.
She landed okay?
Yeah, she did. Tiny actually felt much more comfortable jumping from a plane because there was a lot less unpredictability than with the balloons.
Yeah. There's
You
less
know?
fire.
Less chance of fire. Also, you can steer a plane.
Yes.
It's not as susceptible to the winds.
Yeah.
It is susceptible, not as susceptible to wind. It won't just like suddenly. So she felt more comfortable there, and it meant that she was willing to do higher and more complicated jumps. One of the things that Glenn Martin did that set him apart from other aviators was that he had decided to build a pontoon boat. So those are the ones that can take off and land in water.
Mm-hmm.
And that same year, they decided that this is what they were going to do. They were going to have her jump out of a seaplane.
Okay.
So they went to Chicago for a big celebration, and they took off from, I think, Lake Michigan. And while she was in the air, she parachuted back into Lake Michigan. And it was a big deal. It was the first time anyone had ever jumped from a seaplane.
Mm-hmm.
And she was carrying this big wreath, like that they were going to present to them, I think the mayor of the city or the governor of Illinois. I can't remember which.
Yeah.
Like, they knew she was landing in water. Can't understand. So, like, she gets out of the water and she's like dripping, sogging wreath. Here you go, sir. Anyway, this made her the very first person to ever jump out of a seaplane.
Awesome.
After this jump, Wilbur Wright of the Wright brothers introduced himself. Like, he was there, and he told her that he admired her.
Ooh.
And obviously, that goes down in, like, her most memorable moments.
Yeah.
Glenn Martin and Tiny had great success as a plane flying, jumping duo. Martin was able to, he was interested in breaking records as well. So he would break records in altitude, which meant that she would break records.
Oh, okay.
And she was breaking jumping records as he was breaking like flying records. And at one point they were hired by like a promotion, like I think the newspapers who were doing like this big promotional thing that they had advertised for weeks, where Glenn and Tiny were going to fly over this downtown part of LA in between skyscrapers that were being built at the time. And they were going to drop like leaflets and gifts because it was around Christmas. So all of the people were like in the streets watching her fly, and like she was jumping out of the plane and parachuting and like spreading gifts out among the people.
Just keep putting shit in her hands.
I just thought that was really cool, actually.
That is really neat.
And so people were getting like gifts.
Yeah.
Like I think they were getting coupons for gifts because they talked about everybody lining up later.
Oh, okay.
At the newspaper office. So I thought that was kind of cool, though. So she is very well known for being a jumper. And in 1914, the U.S. is entering World War I. And the Army Air Corps is like, yikes, we need our flight crews to be able to parachute. Because at this point, a whole bunch of pilots had already died because their planes went down and they had no way to escape. So Tiny was actually asked by the military to come and jump from a military plane to demonstrate how to safely parachute to the ground.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So First Lieutenant Walter R. Taliaferro was the pilot, and they had planned 4 jumps for her to demonstrate. And just like in her plane with Martin, her parachute was woven onto the plane, and it would be open when she jumped, and her body weight was the one that would activate the parachute. All went well for the first 3 jumps, but on the 4th, her line became tangled in the tail.
No.
And she was being whipped back and forth.
No.
Can you imagine? And she knew the only way to save herself was to detach from the static line that she was connected to. So calmly and completely under control, while she's being whipped back and forth, in what must have been probably the scariest moment of her life, she reached up and cut off the line, leaving herself with a short length so that she could manually open the parachute. And that's exactly what she did, and she landed safely on the ground. And this quick thinking not only saved her life, but it meant that she had once again changed the way people would jump from planes forever. What she did that day was invent what's now known as the ripcord. she was also the first person in that jump to ever make a free fall descent.
Oh, wow.
A premeditated free fall descent, right? Like a planned one. I'm sure there were other people who just were like, I'm falling out of a plane. No, she was like intentionally jumping from a plane, like, and had cut her cord. Like, she could have tried to open the parachute or tried to get back in the plane, but she was like, no, I'm going to snip this and I'm going to open the chute.
Mm-hmm.
So she did this free fall descent that she had obviously thought about and planned, and then opened her chute once she had like fallen for a while.
Yeah.
And that's how the ripcord was made.
Wow.
That was the first time it was ever
it was ever used.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So the Army was impressed. And the pack she wore, which again was created by Charles Broadwick, but Glenn Martin took credit for and continues even now to have been credited as the maker.
Wow.
That was thereafter known as the life preserver of the air, which it was.
Yeah.
So the Army was actually still reluctant, though, to incorporate parachutes on pilots. They had this like weird fear that pilots would abandon their planes too early, or they would just abandon the planes altogether, and like the planes would be driven to the ground even though they could have been saved.
Still need to protect your people that are flying.
Yeah. So anyway, they still didn't give them
oh my gosh.
parachutes. So like World War I, they just never really incorporated it that much. And it could have been, because that's what they hired her to do, is to show them how to safely jump. It was during this time, though, that she severed ways with Charles Broadwick for good. I don't know what happened, but like there's no evidence that they had any contact with each other ever again.
That is really odd.
Yeah.
And
And there was supposedly some financial and legal troubles that Charles was in. And this is still, again, Glenn Martin is publicly taking credit for this pack. Reporters are going to Charles Broadwick and saying, didn't you make this? Like, we have photos of your pack that you made years prior. And he's like, good old Martin. Like, something is just real fucking hinky here.
Yeah.
And then for her to be like, I'm never speaking to you again. I don't know. Very weird. Don't know what happened. Tiny also had gotten married during this time. She had gotten married in 1912, I believe it was, to a schooner master named Andrew Olson. The marriage did not last. She was flying out. She was jumping on planes. He was on ships for long periods of time.
Okay.
They
Just didn't click.
Yeah. In 1916, she married again, this time to a man named Harry Brown. And Harry seemed like he had a little bit more of his shit together. He had been one of the people who helped create the Greyhound bus line that went from LA to Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
So, a little bit more of a go-getter. But apparently he really hated her parachuting and made her quit.
Ooh.
So she left parachuting for 4 years, but their marriage still didn't work out. Apparently he abandoned her at some point.
Yikes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why it made me wonder when people talked about her first husband abandoning her. It made me wonder if they were confusing the two.
The two. Okay.
And that's why I wonder, because like she became known as Georgia Brown for the rest of her life. So when they talk about her husband, they might only think about that guy.
Okay.
So I kind of wonder if that's why there's been a confusion in her biography, if maybe he had been the one who abandoned her, and since that was her last name, and everybody just assumed when she said her husband died that, or left her or whatever, that they were confusing the two. So I tend to believe maybe the first husband did die in an accident, but I don't really know.
Okay.
So he left her. She decided to go back to jumping in 1920. But she only was able to jump for about 2 more years. She had to retire in 1922, and she was only like 28 years old at the time.
My goodness.
Because the years of jumping had really taken a toll on her body, and her ankles especially were like just disintegrating.
Oh no.
Because think about like having to land.
Yeah, over and over and over.
When she was jumping out of balloons, they had actually created like a special kind of boot for her that were trying to like keep her ankles stable. So when she would land, it wouldn't be such a jarring land. But like They didn't have the like maneuvering cords and stuff that skydivers have now, where you can like sort of like lift up and come down on your butt.
So she's hitting hard. She's hitting hard.
Yes, and of course they hadn't come up with like sort of parachuting etiquette, skydiving etiquette. Like here's how you land, here's what you do with your body. So, you know, she was just hitting the ground with her feet.
She's just going for it.
Yeah, and so she was like shattering her ankles all the time. Yes.
That would hurt so
Yeah,
bad.
so bad. So she retired in 1922. Her last jump was from a biplane that was piloted by a pilot named Clyde Pangorn. He was most famous for piloting the first nonstop flight across the Pacific Ocean. Incidentally, Glenn Martin, the person that she spent like her entire plane jumping career with, he had an aircraft company that he created at the time that is still in business today. We know it as Lockheed Martin, the world's largest defense contractor.
Yeah.
Yep. The Martin of Lockheed Martin is Glenn Martin.
Really? That is fucking wild.
Yeah. So after her jumping career was over, she worked on an assembly line in a tire factory. So not real glamorous work.
No, she's also standing still, like on her feet.
I mean, she doesn't have any education.
Yeah.
The only thing she's ever done is be a carnival act.
Yeah. She's got to get work somewhere.
Yeah. So when World War II broke out, she actually was able to somewhat return to her love of aircraft because she was hired to work at Rohr Aircraft Company making aircraft parts.
Okay.
And being part of the war effort. Eventually, though, she ended up working as a caretaker for the elderly. She was like a housekeeper, takes care of them in their homes. And her story was kind of all but forgotten until she met a pair of aviators who were like really into the community named Maxine and Jim Hicks. And they really wanted to raise awareness. They had started to find out about her story and they were like, oh my God, she's still alive? Oh my God, she's here? Oh my God, I want to talk to her. And they were really determined that her story become more well known. Because it's like the 60s at this point, or the 50s. And it's like, you know, it's only like a 30-year difference, like 30 years had gone by.
Yeah.
But people had already just kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
So they were starting to they were involved in so many clubs and organizations that were for like amateur and professional aviators. And so they were like, you should have this person come and speak and tell their story. You should have her come and speak and tell her story. So she started to get a lot more publicity and like spots where she's talking to groups and organizations. And so a lot of people started to know about her.
Yeah.
And so now that she's back in the limelight, more and more organizations are starting to recognize what she had accomplished. So the first major honor she received was the U.S. Government Pioneer Aviation Award in 1953. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
She was also accepted into the OX5 Club. It was an exclusive club only for people who were associated with the manufacture, operation, or maintenance of the OX5 planes prior to 1941. And that was one of the planes that she had been involved in. And that club bestowed the John Glenn Medal on her in 1964. And she was also inducted into their Hall of Fame in 1976, alongside at the same time as Charles Lindbergh, Glenn Martin, and Wilbur Orville Wright.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so she's in the same inductee class with them.
Yeah.
Tiny was also admitted into the exclusive Adventurous Club in Los Angeles, and they presented her with their gold wings in 1972. But the honor that Tiny was most proud of was her admittance into the early birds of aviation. So they had very specific stipulations about who could be allowed. The only people allowed into the early birds are people who piloted an aircraft prior to December 17th, 1916. And the reason why that specific date is chosen is because that's the date that the Wright brothers first flew their plane.
Okay.
So all of the early birds had to be before that.
Okay.
So there was quite a debate as to whether Tiny would be admitted because technically she wasn't a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
But it was pointed out and documented that there were 2 times that she made the ascents and descents in a balloon without using the parachute, and she was by herself.
Yeah.
One time was because the balloon was on fire and it wasn't safe to jump. And the other time, her parachute wouldn't detach from the balloon and she had to navigate it to the ground. So that meant that she had piloted an aircraft in its ascent and descent 2 times. And so they decided she qualified. At the time, the group consisted of 80 men and no women.
Oh, geez.
So at the time, she became the first woman. Eventually, the group expanded to include 598 members. Of that, 12 were women.
Oh.
And Tiny was the first.
That's awesome.
She was also inducted into the Who's Who in the world of aviation. And she's in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the first one to do a free fall and the first person to jump out of a seaplane. Probably my favorite story of her biography, though, was when she was invited to witness the Apollo 13 launch at the John F. Kennedy Space Center in Houston, or in Florida. She was asked by a reporter there if she was a women's liberationist. Because women's lib was like the thing at the time, right? And a lot of women would be like, I don't think so, blah, blah, blah. And she responded, yes, I am. Believe me, when I started out, women all had to stay home. They said back home that I'd get killed. I just hope I live until they get ladies on the moon. And I wish I were a little girl because I would be among the first women to go to the moon.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Right?
She just wants to keep going further and further and further.
Tiny Broadwick died on August 25th, 1978 at the age of 85. She had lived to see her daughter grow up, Verla, and Verla had children of her own. And when Tiny died, she had 6 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren, and 2 great-great-grandchildren.
Oh, that's awesome.
She was buried in the Sunset Gardens in her hometown of Henderson, North Carolina. And I thought this was really cool. The Golden Knights parachuting team from Fort Bragg served as her pallbearers, and they had made her an honorary member of their group in 1964. She also donated some of her packs and parachutes. So to this day, you can see her pack and parachute at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And also one of her parachutes is at the Army Museum Enterprise. So despite her very small size, I think she made quite a huge impact. She broke so many barriers and was listed among some of the greatest aviators of our time. John Glenn, Buzz Aldrin, Charles Lindbergh, the Wright brothers. And yet, she isn't featured among them in our history books.
Aww.
So I feel privileged to have told her story. And I really hope that everybody's listening to this. Whenever you hear those names, I want you to be like, hey, have you ever heard of Tiny? Tiny Broadwick? Because she was in the class with them. And there was always a woman there.
What a great life. That was fun. That was really fun and interesting.
She's so fun.
She is.
There was an interview I watched with her. It was actually on the YouTube channel for the State Archives of North Carolina. And it was an interview from 1963 with her. And the interviewer was 6'4" and she's 5 feet tall. And it was very funny to watch them interact with each other because they're standing. Makes it very awkward. But
That's
she was, he would be asking her questions and she was just such a spitfire. So cool, like so funny. So in charge of her identity and who she was.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I highly recommend watching it. Also, I read her biography by Elizabeth Whitley Roberson. It's called Tiny Broadwick, the First Lady of Parachuting. I use Wikipedia for background information on Charles and Glenn Martin because I didn't know anything about them. I also read an article called Pac-Man by Lisa Ritter for the Smithsonian Magazine, and that's actually all about the whole ordeal between the pack, between Charles Broadwick and Glenn Martin.
Interesting.
Very interesting if you're a nerd like me. I was like, whoa, this is juicy.
I'm just a little upset you didn't bring me a patent to look at.
So that's the thing.
Oh, because there is
Charles Broadwick waited too long to get the patent and Glenn Martin did.
Oh,
so he did have the patent. Yeah. Sorry, Charles.
Snooze, you lose.
There was also an article I found in the archives of the Toledo Blade.
Nice.
called That Daring Young Girl in Parachute, Now 80. So it was when she turned 80 years old.
Nice.
I use the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, particularly for those photos. The Incredible Story of Georgia Tiny Broadwick from the U.S. Army Airborne and Special Operations Museum, and that episode of To Tell the Truth, which is on a YouTube channel by Amanda and Bob Lewis. Thanks, Bob.
That was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Thanks, Bob. Bob Lewis. Thank you for your video. Thank you for, I don't know how you even get like an episode of To Tell the Truth from 1963. I don't know how you get that.
No idea.
And then you put it on
You should
YouTube.
ask Bob.
But Bob Lewis, thank you. Appreciate you.
Well, that was really great. Thank you so much for that story.
Thank you.
We'd like to
thank Lucas McIntyre.
Yes.
Because we're over here gurgling and sniffing and coughing, and you guys don't even have to listen to any of that because he does his job right.
Yes, our wonderful editor.
And also to Jennifer Finch.
For our amazing theme music, L7. Hell yeah.
So good. And we want to thank you all for listening. And we want to let you know that we've already had some responses to our call for listeners who want to share stories about what they're doing in their community. Some really cool stuff coming up. One of them is about one of our listeners who is working really hard on a housing crisis. There's another person who's going to be interviewed and featured who is working on humane conditions in prisons. Fuck cool shit. I'm so excited. And so if you are one of those people, you're like, oh man, I have a cool story, or I want to talk about what I'm doing in my community, please reach out to us. You can email us at idon'tknowherpodcast@gmail.com or through social media. You know, we're everywhere, but we're not good at it. Not so great at the socials, but we're there. We get the messages. We see them. And in order for you to listen to those interviews, which are going to be fucking cool, you need to become a subscriber on Patreon. So
Yes,
please do so. And you can also buy our merch on TeePublic.
Awesome. Another one down. Let's keep it going.
We've got it. We're on a roll now.
All right, guys.
I hope I didn't just jinx us.
Oh, no.
Thank you for listening.
Until next time.
Goodbye.